Hello everyone and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Northern New England chapter of the American Planning Association, and I'm one of the webcast coordinators. The Planning Webcast Series Consortium is a loose-knit organization of over 40 chapters and divisions of APA, not formally affiliated with APA, but we exist really solely to provide high-quality, free CM opportunities for our members. Today is Friday, November 13th, 2015, and we'll hear the presentation From East Coast to West Coast, Active Transportation Successes. For technical help during today's webcast, please type your questions into the chat box found in the webcast toolbar on the right side of your screen, or call the 1-800 number shown. If you have technical problems and you send a chat message to me, I'll do my best to help you, but for truly technical problems, you will need to call the 800 number, which is tech support at GoToWebinar. For content questions related to the presentation, please type those questions into the question box, also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We will answer those at the end of the presentations during our Q&A portion. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions of the consortium, and I'd like to thank all of those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Transportation Planning Division. To learn more about all the chapters, visit www.planning.org/chapters. To learn about divisions, visit www.planning.org/divisions. And on your screen now is a list of the remaining webcasts we have for 2015. It's a series of really good webcasts, and note that the two in December both will be good for ethics CM credits. We're also scheduling webinars for 2016, so if you have good ideas, send them our way. To log your CM credits, you can go to your dashboard on the APA website after logging in. Select Activities by Provider, and for today's webcast, select Transportation Planning Division and choose From East Coast, etc., etc. You can also search by the event number 9003732. This webcast is approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing. You can like us on Facebook. Our address is Planning Webcast Series, and that is perhaps the best way to receive the most up-to-date information on the webcast series. You can also check out our YouTube channel at this address, youtube.com/planningwebcast, or just log into YouTube and search Planning Webcast. PDFs of today's presentations will be available on the ohioplanning.org website /planningwebcast. Today's speakers are Cynthia Hoyle of Alta Planning and Design, Brooke DuBose of Fair and Peers, John Paul Shaffer, Community Development Council of Greater Memphis, and Kit Keller of the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. Before I turn it over to Cynthia to start her presentation, I want to hand the mic over to Kit Keller to tell you a little bit about the association. Kit?
Thank you so much, Ben. The Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals is a membership association, and it's comprised of professionals from many different disciplines: planning, engineering, landscape architecture, public health, law enforcement, and more. And the beauty of that related to this particular topic is that there's great strength in promoting active transportation by collaborating across disciplines. If you're not already working with public health, they just held a conference called Health in All Policies, and that was the theme, and lots of attention was paid to some of the new analytics around active transportation, such as the WHO Health Economic Impact Assessment tools. So take a look at that. And I want to express my gratitude on behalf of APBP to APA's Transportation Planning Division for consistently supporting APBP's monthly webinar program. We are always on the third Wednesday of each month, and we do offer AICP credit as well. So we encourage our members to gather their colleagues together with them in the spirit of that interdisciplinary initiative to listen to the webinar, to watch the webinar, and then to discuss it later in order to have an effective platform of understanding for future action. We have decided on our 2016 webinar topics, and we're very excited since APBP's niche is really in education. We're going to be looking at guidance documents to use, equity issues, bicycle and pedestrian design maintenance, economic impacts and health impacts of design decisions, performance measures, intersections, suburban and exurban pedestrian bicycle issues, traffic analysis, and the ever important issue of funding. So we hope that you'll be able to join APBP with some of those future 2016 webinars, and we'll actually, you're getting a sneak preview. We haven't even announced these to our members, and we'll do that on Tuesday through our This Week at APBP, and you can access that on our website at www.apbp.org. We invite all attendees of this webinar today to connect with APBP through our chapters and through our website. Although we're a much younger organization than APA, our members are very eager to make the communities where they live, work, and play more walkable and bike-friendly. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Cynthia Hoyle.
Hi everyone, thank you Kit, and I would like to say how pleased I am to be invited to present today. This is not just a vocation for me, but a passion, and I think it is helpful for us to have the conversation about how we make these transitions to become more active communities, because saying that we want to do it and then being able to do it are not always the same thing. And we have a system in which most of our roadways and bridges were built and designed around the car, and yet 30% of our population does not drive, so how are they accommodated? And one of the questions I also ask people when I do workshops is, the baby boomers are starting to retire and age out of driving, and so what are you going to do with us? Because you're going to have a lot of people who at some point cannot drive. We have safety concerns that we need to address. We have about 12% of the trips in the United States are made by pedestrians and bicyclists, and yet they account for nearly 15% of the motor vehicle crashes. So this is something the U.S. Department of Transportation has identified as a #1 priority, and some of you may have heard as well about the Zero campaign that they have launched to try and address this. There are also, communities are also dealing with issues of liability. We have the ADA Act, and there are lawyers who have been traveling the country looking for communities that have not moved forward with retrofitting their communities and filing lawsuits on behalf of those who are having issues. So that's another concern for communities. And in health concerns, we know, I'm sure all of you know about the sedentary lifestyle impact and the negative health outcomes that provides to our citizens, but they can't walk or bike if they don't have infrastructure to do it. And so the health community has become much more engaged in our transportation system and discussing how the built environment is impacting our health. So that's another motivation for this. Equity, as Kit mentioned, is another concern, particularly for those people who simply are not able to afford to drive a car. And so a lot of our conversation within our communities can be viewed through an equity framework, including how we prioritize projects and investments and how we do outreach, and looking at traditionally underserved populations that need the opportunity to move around the community, to get to school, to get to work and other locations without having a car. Then there's the issue of resiliency, and having multiple modes creates redundancy in the community and gives us the opportunity to address issues. I started to include a slide here showing what happens when we try to evacuate large metropolitan areas by a single occupancy vehicle, and we have found that is not an efficient way for us to handle resiliency in our communities. So you may have seen this recently, some of the data that has come out showing that the metro areas with the lowest rates of automobile commuting, and then it showed the second most common commute mode for those communities. And as usual, we have New York City here at the top, but I took the liberty of circling some of the other communities that one would not necessarily think of as multimodal communities, such as Ithaca, New York, and Boulder, Colorado, Corvallis, Oregon, Iowa City, Iowa, and then further down we've got Bremerton, Silverdale, Washington, Missoula, Montana, and last but not least, where I live on this list that I wanted to highlight for you is Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and I'm going to talk about how we have been making that transition here and enabling people to move around without having to drive everywhere for all of their trips. I thought I would show you the chart of how we have been increasing our rates. Previous to this, from 1980 to 2000, the rates of walking, biking, and transit use had been dropping in the community. I moved here in 2001. The transit district had just created a new strategic plan that called for them to take more leadership in advocating for walkable and bikeable and transit supportive development in the communities. At the same time, the cities and the university were all looking at this and trying to develop cooperative strategies for how to give people choices in transportation mode. And as you see, over this time period, we have been making an improvement in the use of transit and bicycling and walking. So what I would say to you, I'm a planner, and so perhaps not a surprise that I think that we have to start with the plans, and that's what we did here. The long-range transportation plan that we were working on when I moved into the community called for a pretty significant shift in how we were building our communities. And we called for more infill and redevelopment. We called for less fringe road building, more transit, more walking and biking, supportive infrastructure. And we accomplished quite a lot of that in the last few years. But it's not just here. We are a university community, which provides us with a somewhat different demographic than other communities. But if you ask the public at large, most Americans want more options. They want to have the freedom to choose, and they don't feel that they have a choice, and they really want to spend less time in their car, but they don't find a way to do that. And so it is an issue of land use, infrastructure, and design. So to engage the public, we really have to work collaboratively with other organizations, and we have to go to the community that we want input from. Our traditional model of advertising a public meeting in the evenings and having people give us input has not always served us well. So creating working partnerships with those institutions that make connections, particularly in underserved communities, churches, park districts, public health districts, etc., are all critical to getting input from everyone in the community. And then we can create plans with a vision, and we have solid evidence to support those plans based on public input. We have to plan for implementation. That's a part of our planning process that often is neglected, and we have to be creative in finding funding options because we are all dealing with decreasing resources and increasing costs for our infrastructure systems. So I thought I would also show you what some of the experts have found in the research that they have done. This is from Measuring the Health Effects of Sprawl that Barbara McCann and Reed Ewing wrote together for Smart Growth America and the Surface Transportation Policy Project. And these are the main things they said that we should do is invest in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, work on traffic calming, create safe routes to school programs, which is something that I proposed to the transit district here upon starting to work with them, and has been a great tool. And then you can read the rest of this: retrofit our sprawling neighborhoods, etc., and do education and encouragement, and I'm going to talk about that some more too. Then recently, Reed Ewing and his partner, Mr. Bartholomew, have done some really on-the-ground, exactly what characteristics, what features provide people with the ability to walk and bike. And the pedestrian and transit-oriented design book that they wrote is very helpful. I use it in a class I teach on active transportation planning at the University of Illinois in the planning program here. And so what you see here is we have to pay attention to densities, a mix of land uses, have shorter blocks, have transit routes within a half a mile or so of everybody's home with a way that they can get there. Calm our streets. We don't always need 4-lane streets, and make sure that they're complete streets, that they have sidewalks and crossings, and buffering from the traffic. Having a sidewalk right next to a street with fast-moving high volume traffic does not make people feel comfortable, and they won't walk there very much. Making sure that we have design that enhances the walking environment of street-oriented buildings and comfortable and safe places to wait. All of those are important factors. So as I mentioned, we started with our long-range transportation plan back in the early 2000s, and this was the goal that we set out for ourselves. We wanted to create safe, efficient, and economical transportation system and use our existing resources and infrastructure, optimize mobility, and all of the other factors that the Federal Highway Administration asked us to look at: the environment, accessibility, and economic development. We are an academic community, and we love plans. These are just a few I've shown you. I could fill up a couple of slides with a list of all of the plans that we do. But the key ones are to make sure that you have transportation plans that look at your system being multimodal, provide for implementation of complete streets policies. Champaign Moving Forward was a plan that the City of Champaign did that started this for that community. And then bicycle plans, developing a network, also creating pedestrian plans is helpful too. Sometimes it's hard to find funding to do those additional plans. The other part that's really key is the community partnerships, and because we're a multi-jurisdictional community, and many of you may live in similar communities, we have 2 cities and a university, and so we have to collaborate, and the streets are owned by different people on campus. So we created, the community created before I came here, a campus area transportation study, and they pulled all the agencies together and developed safety problems they developed a plan to address safety problems on campus because we had a pretty high fatality rate for pedestrians. And now we have recently, in recent years, not had any pedestrian or bicycle fatalities on campus, in part due to the very hard work everyone has been doing. So when we went out and asked the public what they wanted, we got really clear and consistent messages through all of those plans that we did. And they did not ask for more roads or interchanges or parking garages. They asked for improved bicycle infrastructure and routing. They wanted better street lighting. They wanted a continuous sidewalk network. They wanted more transit service. They wanted more direct routes and more evening service. And so we had solid community support and redundancy in the plans for making it a multimodal transportation system. Sometimes it's also really important for us to take a look at how we are explaining our vision to the communities. When we talk about density, people become very anxious about that. And so we did things like create some visuals on how we would transition from the existing streetscape to higher densities so that people could understand that we're talking about 2- and 3-story buildings along high transit corridors. We're not talking about creating a Chicago loop or other high-rise locations, although we have had quite a few developers come into the community now and without any incentive build high-rise housing for students close to campus. And so our densities in many places around campus are equivalent to the density within the loop in Chicago, which supports transit and walking and biking very well. I would also suggest to you that we need to pay attention to the 5 E's: education, encouragement, enforcement, engineering, and evaluation. Those are all part of what you do with Safe Routes to School programs if you apply to become a bicycle-friendly community, and I will talk about how we have worked on those locally. Of course, engineering is the most expensive and visible part of this, and so it's important for us to try and create plans to have a connected sidewalk system with good crosswalks, well-designed crosswalks, proper bike infrastructure, not just bike lanes, and not badly designed bike lanes, but bike infrastructure that fits the context, to do road diets where we can, and to make sure that our school zones have good signage, all of those things, good bike parking and trails. And I wanted to also briefly say that the AASHTO Greenbook is not an impediment to our accomplishing this. This is a quote from the Greenbook, and it is very specific in saying that the pedestrians are the lifeblood of our urban areas and that we often have to make provisions for them, and it sometimes calls for engineering judgment on the part of the community. So we implemented a number of successful road diets in our community. This was one that was done early on. There are now nice bus stops on either side. You can see it was a 4-lane, wide open and friendly environment, and for pedestrians and bicyclists, the traffic just certainly did not warrant 4 lanes. So we did a road diet and created additional access. There are nice bus shelters here now and a mid-block crossing, and the economic development along this corridor is an indication of how investing in that infrastructure can make a difference in the economy of a street. We've done a lot of work on upgrading pedestrian infrastructure. Mid-block crossings are important in those locations where people need to get to destinations, and there are designs that can be used for a variety of roads from lower traffic volume to very high traffic volume. Upgrading our transit infrastructure is key, giving people real-time information so that they know the next bus is coming soon. If you're standing outside and the wind chill is -10, knowing that your bus is actually going to be there in 2 minutes is a very important part of having trust and confidence in the transit system. We've installed bike lanes to do traffic calming. We've prioritized pedestrians and put in things like a pedestrian scramble on campus where we have thousands of pedestrians crossing, making them the priority on campus in terms of the transportation system, with bicyclists second and transits third and single occupancy vehicles last. So we need to ensure that our transit stops are convenient and accessible, that people can safely cross the street at those transit stops. That's key. And that we have to recognize that pedestrian crashes are often associated with those transit stops, and so we have to look at their design. In encouragement, we did a variety of things in the community. The group that was coordinating together, the 2 cities, the university, the transit district, and the Regional Council of Governments, we all went together and we put together a number of initiatives, including we had to make a revenue guarantee for Zipcar to get it here when we did that early on. The community told us through the surveying and the data collection that we did that there were some things they needed to feel confident about using transit and not having a car with them, and one of those things was having access to a car they could borrow, guaranteed ride home programs, those sorts of programs. Evaluation is key, and planners are not very good at, and engineers are not very good at doing this. We need to make sure that we show people that we are having an impact and we are improving our community. And so we need to collect before and after data and have it available to the public in formats that they can easily access and understand to show that we are investing their tax dollars wisely. This is some of the information that we have that is available through our MPO. They do a great job of providing this information to the public in visual ways, showing them the progress that we are making as a community and giving people choices in transportation. We know that over 30% of Urbana residents walk, bike, or ride the bus to work, and so we have to accommodate them in providing a year-round transportation system, and that includes giving them access to bike racks on buses and having the real-time information and cleared access in the wintertime to those facilities. So I will wrap up with that, and I will be happy to answer questions at the end of the session. And now I will turn this over to, I have to give this to Brooke.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was terrific. So while I wait for Cynthia to give me the controls, I just want to say good morning from sunny California. My name is Brooke DuBose, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland. And let's see, let me show my screen. I am an associate for Fair and Peers. We are a national multimodal planning and engineering firm. We specialize in sustainable transportation solutions for our clients. And I'm going to be talking a little bit today about design innovations in the pedestrian and bicycle world. I've had the opportunity to work for about 10 years in this field, and it is always a delight to be exploring new solutions for the people that we work with. I've worked throughout New York City and the California Bay Area on pedestrian bicycle master plans, complete streets work. Right now I'm leading the development of the expansion of bike share throughout the Bay Area. We're developing it in 5 cities and are planning to launch it on the ground next year, so that's been really fun. And I also am proud to serve on the board of directors for APDP. Really want to encourage everybody, if you haven't visited our website yet, please do so. Membership is very low cost and reaps a number of great benefits, including a terrific webinar series and a lot of other great perks. So with that, I'm going to launch into my presentation. It's truly a transformational time for active transportation, and it's really one of the most exciting industries to work in. Until recently, we've been using a number of limited approved design tools, and that box has just been blown open as cities across the U.S. have started experimenting with innovative designs. And the great news is that we're now attracting many more people to walk and bicycle safely. So just a little bit of background on what we're working with. The traditional standards for transportation design are really either geometric or traffic control related. The geometric standards have traditionally been led by the Association of State and Highway Officials, which is AASHTO, and also our state DOT design manuals. And then the traffic control standards are really led by the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's at the federal level, but we also have them at the state level as supplements or even as their own MUTCD. And so really that's what cities and states have been working within for the last 50+ years. And we've also seen a lot of cities and states adopting their own design standards in this time as well. So there's really a lot of standards to be working and wading through. And until recently, local planners and engineers are really hesitant to deviate from these. But today we have a number of supplemental design guides to draw from. I won't go into all of them because there are several, and they're great. The NACSO guide is really receiving, I think, probably the most attention right now, and they've actually published several, not just on bikeway design, but also on complete streets and transit as well. And these guides are being endorsed by a number of state DOTs and agencies and organizations, and it's really setting a new standard for the design of innovative facilities. If you haven't already seen it, I encourage you to take a look. They're online and they're free, and it's a very user-friendly resource. So who benefits from these new tools? Well, as you know, and as Cynthia discussed, pedestrians are really our most vulnerable roadway users, with seniors and children being disproportionately injured and killed. And so we're starting to be able to make a real impact on the safety and public health when we design and plan for all ages and abilities. On the bicycling front, despite building bicycle networks for the past 50 years, we feel like we're only really hitting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to capturing bicycle mode share. And research tells us that many more people would like to bike, but they want more separation from moving traffic. And we also have a lot of better tools for analyzing that experience. Level of traffic stress is one of the newest metrics that we're working with right now, and it enables us to score streets and intersections according to how stressful they feel to bike on. This is a really useful instrument in terms of helping us figure out where our priorities are and the types of treatments to apply there. So now that we know the types of communities we want to support and where the improvements should be made, we can really reach into our expanded toolbox that offers a tremendous range of design treatments. And I'm just going to highlight a few here today. So on the pedestrian side, there are several tools for improving pedestrian crossings. The rectangular rapid flashing beacon is really useful on either single or multi-lane streets with relatively low speeds. It's activated with either passive detection or a push button, and it has a stutter flash. It's similar to the lights on the top of a police car, and it's found to be very effective in improving safety and yielding for drivers, and it's lower cost than a full signal would be. Pedestrian hybrid beacons are another great crossing tool, particularly for the multi-lane crossings where we're seeing that multiple threat situation where one driver may stop to yield for pedestrian, but another driver in the next lane may not see that pedestrian. So for the hybrid beacon, the signal rests in dark until it's activated, and then it runs through 6 phases of yellow and red flashing lights until it ends in a full red light. It's been found to be very effective, and it's also less expensive than a full signal. One of the leading causes of collisions, both for bicyclists and for pedestrians, are from vehicles turning left or right into them. Leading pedestrian intervals address this by giving the pedestrians basically a head start. Cars are held at a red light, and pedestrians then have at least 3 seconds, if not more, of lead time to basically start walking into the intersection. It improves the visibility and helps pedestrians sort of show that they have a clear priority. Another aspect of pedestrian signals are, as they're being replaced, countdown signals are really the new standard for replacement there. This is really helpful information, particularly for seniors and for small children who need more time to cross the street, by letting them know how much time they have and maybe to wait until the next walk signal. It's also helpful for bicyclists and drivers to really understand and navigate the intersections as well. Here's a really nice example of a pedestrian scramble in downtown Oakland, just a block away from where I work. Pedestrian scrambles hold all directions of traffic with a red light so that people can freely walk across the intersection in all directions. They're ideal for areas with really high pedestrian volume, so the application is pretty specific here. And we're also seeing cities get more creative with their crosswalks, and here's a couple of fun examples of decorative crossings. I also want to remind you that really, the devil is in the details for pedestrian and bicycle design, and I can't really emphasize that enough. I often see curb ramps pointed diagonally into the intersection, and this can be a real challenge for people with visual impairments who are dependent on those curb ramps to tell them where to walk. So really the best practice is to provide bi-directional ramps to route people directly into the marked crosswalks. And if you have push buttons for pedestrians, make sure that they're no more than a couple of feet from the ramp. Oftentimes they're several feet away, and it can be really hard for people with strollers or wheelchairs to maneuver between the button and the ramp and crosswalk. And then finally, pavement to parks or parklets. These are exploding across the U.S. They're a beautiful transformation of parking spaces or otherwise underutilized street space and creating vibrant public spaces for people to gather. Really just kind of nibbling back the asphalt for people rather than vehicle storage. I'm going to jump into some of our design tools for bicycling now. On the bicycle design front, cycle tracks are far and away the hottest trend and easily deserve their own webcast. With the release of the better design guidance that we've seen, a jump in these facilities over the last 5 years, we're now seeing over 200 examples in the U.S. and are able to capture a lot of really useful safety and access data on them as well. Adding buffers between a traditional bike lane and moving traffic, as well as the door zone from parked cars, is another really effective way to increase the distance between bicyclists and vehicles. So even for your existing facilities, there's ways to enhance them when you go to repave the street or restripe that street. We're also seeing the use of colored bike lanes in high conflict areas and key areas for bicyclists. And green is really the accepted color and very effective in identifying bicycle facilities and routes. This is an example on the left of a greenback sharrow, which is fairly new, just was introduced in the Bay Area a couple of years back, and now we're seeing applications in other cities as well. And then this green bike lane application in Brooklyn on the right side clearly designates where the bike lane is, and the driver should not be double parked or loading in that area. Bicycle boulevards or residential green streets are not necessarily a new concept. Here in Berkeley, we've had them for 40 years. They're basically a family-friendly bike route for low-volume residential streets, and typically use wayfinding and signage to designate them. Bike boulevards are wonderful to ride on until you get to a major intersection, and this is where we've seen sort of more limited application of them, where they're great on the residential streets, and then it's very difficult to cross on the larger streets. And so cities are now addressing this issue through providing median refuges. We want those refuges to be at least 6 feet wide, so that if you're standing in the middle of a street with a bicycle, that your wheels are protected. We're also seeing better signalization of those crossings, so it's either easier to navigate across multi-lanes of traffic. And then using mini roundabouts and other traffic calming features along the way can also help to lower vehicle speeds and make it a more comfortable ride. So I mentioned how turning conflicts are one of the primary collision factors for pedestrians and bicyclists, and bike-specific signals are really an important tool for regulating vehicle turning movements across facilities. And we're frequently using these on cycle track applications to basically regulate the turning movement across the cycle track. Other tools for improving safety at intersections are the bike box and the two-stage turn box. These basically designate spaces at the intersection for bicyclists to wait for a green light away from vehicles. The bike box was introduced in Portland a few years ago after they experienced a couple of pretty serious collisions between turning vehicles and bicyclists. So this helps provide a clear waiting space for bikes in front of the cars. And the two-stage turn box is basically a place for people to wait to turn left across traffic if they're not comfortable with merging across several lanes of traffic. Major intersections can be probably one of the most challenging areas for bicyclists to cross, and especially make left turns. The concept of a protected intersection has been built in Europe, but they're a very new concept to us in the U.S. They provide physically separated areas for bicyclists to wait and turn. And the first built example is in Davis and has received very positive reviews. There's a photo on the lower right of that. Just a couple of other design tools. Make sure to include trail crossings that comfortably accommodate bikes, as I mentioned before. Median refuges provide a lot of comfort and support, and they should be at least 6 feet wide. Designing your crosswalk so that bicyclists and pedestrians are clearly designated there. And then bike parking really also deserves its own webinar, but it's just as critical as the ride itself as in encouraging people to bike. Valet bike parking at bike stations for long-term bike parking, and in-street bike corrals, as you see in the picture on the right side, are great for shorter-term parking needs in more commercial areas. These are wonderful tools to make sure that people have a complete ride from beginning to end. So in closing, we have many intrepid planners and engineers who are really pushing these innovative designs, and often they face funding or political challenges. I'm sure you're all familiar with that in your daily work and whatever you do. There's a lot of ways to start simple and experiment with these types of treatments. You might want to consider using Bike to Work Day as a great platform to test out some temporary cycle tracks. Here are a few examples that we've done in Oakland and Berkeley and in Richmond, California here. You might also want to test out innovative crossing designs that just use lower cost materials and aren't permanent, so you can see how your design is working and gather public input on it so that you can really refine it and make the permanent design optimal for everybody. And I expect that John will be sharing more of these ideas, so I'm going to pass the mic over to him. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brooke. That is a perfect segue. Let me get into slideshow. So again, John Paul Shaffer with Livable Memphis of the Community Development Council. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our local experience translating some of these design concepts. You know, the kind of things that you show them on a screen, and that'll never work here in insert location, and how we've kind of used tactical urbanism concepts and events to demonstrate the use of these, kind of show the possibilities, and really use it as a tool towards getting better design for active transportation into the process for how we design and redesign streets. We come at it at a very neighborhood level focus. So we'll talk about kind of what the elements are in the neighborhood that support these kinds of things. And you know, I'm a planner too, and I'm here to say if you're lucky enough to have a neighborhood plan that gets you towards some of these, step away from the plan and grab your paintbrushes and power tools. So a little bit about my organization. You know, why is a community development organization involved in this? The CD Council really was formed as a trade organization and representing community development corporations and the other partners that are involved in that neighborhood redevelopment, community development space. Livable Memphis, over the past 10 years, has kind of served as the public-facing side of that, and really focusing on the neighborhood issues like transportation and place at an advocacy and outreach kind of a level. Really looking at options and choices for neighborhoods. So we've been involved in that space in a number of bicycle and pedestrian kind of wins, looking at staff changes and getting infrastructure on the ground, our ordinances, and right now, you know, working on things like launching our bike share system. You know, I got involved in this through working with our local bike co-op, and now has advanced to where I'm getting to do it, you know, as my vocation. I also am on the board of directors of Bike Walk Tennessee, so doing this in my personal time as well. You know, a big part of our role has been on this reclaiming streets as a concept of public space, looking at complete streets, you know, kind of a focus on people, and really designing with the context and meeting the needs of roadway users, not just their mode of travel. Memphis is a big freight town, so we hear that a lot. You know, how do we accommodate freight when we're doing these kinds of projects? You know, but we're saying that the focus should be switched where, you know, we change what the default hierarchy is when we need to look at special needs of a corridor. We actually worked on developing the Complete Streets Manual for the city of Memphis through a planning grant. You know, a big part of this has been the challenge of explaining how the pieces of our network that are being developed now fit into a bigger picture. Memphis is a city of over 300 square miles, so a lot of, you know, bike lane to nowhere kind of concepts come up. So this tactical urbanism approach has gotten us a long way into getting to that. Basically took this on about 5 years ago, looking at the Better Block folks out of Texas and organizations like Street Plans out of New York, and looking at how we create a phased approach to really pushing things over the edge and instigating change at a local level. You know, looking at what can we do that's low cost, low risk, but has a real high potential for reward, and then some of the spillover benefits that happen here, whether it's economic development in the neighborhood or developing capacity and social capital between citizens and institutions and other organizations. Some of these things are tiny little projects like building a free library or things like that, but then a big part of it is about creating compelling spaces and inviting places within neighborhoods to which people want and can bike or walk to. So that's a big part of it. And how to harness this energy to kind of keep these things and sustain them over the long term. So here I'm just going to do a few quick case studies going all the way back to 2010, which was our first tactical urbanism better block type project, and it was focusing on Broad Avenue, and I think everyone can see my mouse. Over here is Overton Park, and this is Sam Cooper, which would have been Interstate 40. I'm sure we've all heard of that case. It would have gone through Overton Park. It was stopped at the Supreme Court, but not before this section of the highway had been built, cutting through the neighborhood of Binghamton. And then you can see Broad up here, which used to be a major commercial thoroughfare for the neighborhood. But now here we are in 2010, and it's carrying fewer than 3,000 cars a day. You can see how overbuilt it is for that and what kind of behavior that would encourage. It also had been really removed from the residential portion of the neighborhood, so the commercial corridor had seen a lot of disinvestment and high vacancy rates. So Livable Memphis and the Business Association on Broad came together to put on an event called A New Face for an Old Broad. And really, community partners coming together to put up, pop-up and mobile retailers to look at installing temporary and permanent public art. Really doing a community build, focusing on the street. You can see down here in the bottom some of the kind of street elements, painting some cycle track type bike lanes, protected bike lanes, which were the first that anyone had seen here, and some other elements like that. So here you see, about how we did it, and I have to say, not that I would recommend this, but we did this using Home Depot latex paint, which actually some of it is still on the street to this day as we're working towards full build out of the Hampline, which is going to be the cycle track that's permanently built there. But you can see some of the people out on the day of the event kind of using those facilities. And then one of my favorite, we had to close because we completely sold out of food snapshots. So fast forward about a year, we're already starting to see private investment in the street. We're starting to see occupancy rates go up. We're starting to see property owners invest in more public art and things like that. And meanwhile, the infrastructure, because the business owners had really taken ownership of it, was allowed to stay there because it was designed more or less to the city's specs, even though it was a type of infrastructure they'd never seen or dealt with on the ground. And then again, kind of coming forward to 2015, this really has spurred over $20 million in investment. They're at nearly 100% occupancy, a number of public art installations. You can see in the upper left a bicycle rainbow gate where Interstate 40 would have come into Overton Park. So that's what you see now. It really has been, a huge tool for reducing blight in the neighborhood and connecting some of the surrounding residential neighborhoods to this commercial corridor. And then we'll have the Hampline, which again is that cycle track project coming. You can see at the bottom right-hand corner kind of an interim design for that. Recognizing that we wouldn't necessarily see that same level of success everywhere, we looked at, how can we replicate this and take it to other neighborhoods around the city? What are some of the elements? What did we learn from the Broad Avenue event? Can we bring government into this? They were not really engaged in that project, but could we engage them and other community partners to do more of these, and then to take what we learn and create some sort of toolkit for other groups to be able to do the same kind of things. So our innovation team actually came up with the MEMFix brand and looked at how they said putting neighborhoods back on the mental map of Memphians, and recognizing that these revitalization projects are changing, they're kind of scaling down and becoming more incremental. They're being led by the community. by a diverse group that has some sort of vision for these neighborhood spaces. And then looking at how government can be reoriented to deliver some of these more finer grained needs at the neighborhood level. You know, and recognizing that innovation comes out of this kind of chaotic, small, incremental process that can lead to real change. So the first one of the MEMFix events was in an area that's it's crosstown between our midtown and our medical district, which are two centers of pretty substantial development and redevelopment. We'll start to see a trend of how some of these more successful MEMFix projects are in neighborhoods that are kind of in between two existing strong places. In this one, all of those street changes were done temporarily, recognizing that this roadway was going to be redesigned with this big redevelopment of the Sears distribution building that's in the neighborhood. So this was done with, you know, paint and spray chalk and temporary signage and things like that to do a road diet, which is now being permanently implemented with protected bike lanes and all of those kinds of things. The Crosstown project is actually going to be a pretty exciting vertical urban village type project where they're taking one of the 1920s Art Deco Sears buildings and redeveloping that into Crosstown Concourse. You know, some of the elements that emerged in this built on the Broad Avenue event and have become kind of a routine part of MEMFix type events, whether it's, you know, looking at increasing retailers in the neighborhood on a temporary level, you know, getting people into vacant buildings, and then starting to look at some of the things that happen after the event. But probably the most important part here was that we did get city government, 7 different divisions at a table, coordinating and talking about how we prototype these ideas, how the city can add services like trash pickup and police and fire service the day of the event that reduce the cost of putting on these events to a private partner, and really get the city bought in on seeing what works for these neighborhoods. The next event moved into a neighborhood that's more distressed and probably at less of a tipping point. It's just south of our downtown. But a neighborhood that had a really rich cultural history. The Stax Museum is there, Lemoyne College, one of our HBCUs, and then churches, and a neighborhood with really deep roots in the civil rights movement of the mid-20th century. And so what this one served to do was really launch a larger neighborhood planning effort. This was the first one where we were able to leave some of the prototyped infrastructure in a kind of interim design strategy, that kind of pavement to plaza type, you know, doing bump outs with paint and flex posts and things like that. And the other thing that this MEMFix did was actually kick off the MEMShop program. And the MEMShop program really gets back to the importance of what brings people to the neighborhood and these neighborhood spaces, you know, to use innovative active transportation infrastructure. This one looked at kind of orienting this same approach inside of vacant buildings and really kind of sustaining momentum in neighborhoods after these events have happened as a goal of, you know, moving towards increased economic activity and some of the longer term development goals and capacity building. So just a quick snapshot of what that looks, you know, when you take the MEMFix approach and take it inside, you know, taking these buildings and doing low-cost improvements, not really making any structural changes, but moving from, you know, something that just needs some paint and some furnishings inside to something like what you see here, which is actually on Broad Avenue. The first one that Livable Memphis took really a lead role on was in a neighborhood called The Edge. Again, this is kind of a neighborhood on the cusp, both geographically and in terms of interest. It's sandwiched between downtown Memphis and our medical district, which has a lot of investment going on right now. This particular neighborhood, because of the highly institutional nature of the medical district, you know, and recognizing that we needed something to connect downtown there that's not just large buildings that, you know, the activity shuts down at 5 p.m. kind of thing. This neighborhood was a focus of the Urban Land Institute, our downtown commission, a number of medical center stakeholders and local foundations. So for us, it kind of served as one of those tipping point criteria to do a MEMFix. In this one, again, we were able to kind of move to a more permanent or interim kind of strategy for infrastructure. You can see in the upper left-hand corner here, one of those, and I'll show kind of the transformation of the street in a few slides. But again, this one really showed the importance of sustaining the attractors that we're putting in the neighborhood for people who are riding, walking, bicycling. This one, we did not do a mem shop, and while there are some, long-term businesses and some newer businesses here, I think some of the momentum on making the infrastructure more permanent is a little bit slower here. Again, we did have city kind of buy-in here, and they helped by, striping the bike lanes and doing some of that to supplement the volunteer experience. Art was a big part of this one. There are some galleries in the area, so we had some partners there that were able to kind of even take those pavement to plaza spaces and do a little something extra inside of them. So just a quick snapshot, looking from one end of the street to the other. Again, this is kind of a 4-lane cut-through street that carries very few cars a day, but at a very high speed. And you can see the width of this intersection here. And then looking the opposite direction. And so what we did was go in there and really just carve out the excess space in those roads, take away a lane in each direction, still plenty of space to handle the number of cars coming through, but added dedicated bike lanes, did some of the bump out pavement to plaza kind of concepts, new crosswalks, added a stop sign to kind of slow down cars. Really slowing down the traffic was a huge goal for this neighborhood. Sun Studios is a huge tourist attraction. It's right at the end of this block that you can see down at the far end. And then a good shot of just kind of what that whole plaza space looked like. And then looking back the other direction again. So just taking what we learned and trying to translate it into something that not just a neighborhood organization could use to do a similar project, but really, kind of framing what the future of this program is for our organization, and kind of what are the tools that have worked, kind of getting everything in one place as far as resources and ideas for the community. This was actually funded through an EPA grant, and one of the deliverables was to do a how-to guide. So we came up with the MEMFix manual and really looked at what the essential elements are for these kind of events, and a big part of it is that they're flexible, they're customizable, they're inclusive. One of my favorite things is, as far as setting meeting agendas, for the first meeting I found that you basically have one item. It's airing of the grievances. It's what has not worked in our neighborhood, what do we really want to address. As long as you can get through that without anybody breaking into a fight in that first meeting, I think it's a success. But then also kind of digging down a little more and looking at, what can government bring to the table? Do you have champions within local government who are interested in these kind of approaches? It's not a huge amount of money. A lot of the times it's in-kind resources that are being put towards it. But finally, don't let sitting around a table planning it really get in the way of doing, because what you're doing here is testing ideas and demonstrating how they might work or might not work. You're taking a little bit of a risk, and some things might need to go away or be reapproached at the end of the day. But just recognizing that doing is what you're here really for. One of the most important things is really assessing whether a neighborhood or an organization is ready to do this. You have a couple of pretty good factors, in my opinion, that really lead to success of these programs. And first of all is having really some buy-in from the neighborhood, having someone in the neighborhood who's going to be a champion for this, who's going to still be there at the end of the day working on the neighborhood. And then the built environment really does come into play. And so we've also included in here, if you're not ready for that, what are some of the incremental steps, whether it's crowdfunding a smaller project through ioby or someone like that, scaling to a smaller location, doing a half-day event that doesn't have as big of a scope. And then we put some of the tools for site planning and links to things like the AASHTO design guides and some of the other technical urbanism firms what they're kind of doing, just connecting people to the resources that get you to that level. And then looking, on our end, what are we looking for in a neighborhood that we're going to go in and partner with to deliver one of these events? And again, a big part of it is that leadership within the neighborhood. Is there a vision? Are they ready to move on it? And is there somebody who's there who's going to sustain that after the event is over? Resources, again, it does take some money to do these. They can be done very cheaply. They can be done at a bigger scale. But really looking at, again, the human resources that are going into it. Who are your partners? Who's working on it? Who's at the table? And is it really kind of getting towards what the neighborhood's vision is for itself in terms of transportation, what kind of economic activity they want to see? And then finally, some of the urban form considerations. Is there retail space? Is there foot traffic or the potential for it? Is it accessible to the community? Is the community interested in this space? Really trying to dial down to a 2 to 3 block level to show how well something like this can work, and then scale up from there. And then really documenting the process, doing some of the kind of tracking afterwards. You set a baseline and start to measure things like rental rates and foot traffic and things like that. I show this this tool we have here called the mobile porch, which is actually a mobile porch on wheels on a trailer that has tablets for capturing surveys and for shooting video, and just kind of serves as a focal point during these events for a place to have conversations about what's going on that day. And with that, I guess we can open it up for questions. That was all I got.
Thanks, John. This has been a lot of fun to listen to and see the work that you all have been doing. And I guess as our attendees start putting in their questions, and we do have a couple lined up, I guess I'd like to start with a kind of a comment and ask you all to comment on something. I'm working on a project right now. It's developing a film for planners but more the general public as well about wayfinding for blind people or people with visual impairments. The film is called Getting There, and it's going to be released very soon, and we hope to get it on public broadcasting. But one thing that has really I've seen a lot in working on this film and thinking about how people get around the built environment when they have difficulty seeing or can't see it at all, is how we design things. So, Brooke, you made, I think, the excellent point about the orientation of curb cuts at crosswalks, and I've seen lots of them that aim people to the center of the intersection. If you can see where you're going, it's not a problem. But people who are blind need to navigate generally in straight lines. So sometimes we have median refuges that have these curb cuts that reorient someone, and if you can't see where you're going, you're going to wind up walking straight into traffic. I wonder if any or all of you can comment on design issues for people with visual impairments, given that so many of us, as we age, are going to have a harder time seeing.
So this is Brooke, and you raised some excellent questions. I'm really your documentary sounds fantastic, and I'm excited to see it. I guess one thing that I would note is that when we aim for universal design, so design that accommodates people of all ages and abilities, then we're really making sure that design works for everybody. And so one important strategy is pretty much. I would expect all jurisdictions or most jurisdictions has someone that works on accessibility issues, and partnering with them early and consistently throughout your planning process can really help make sure that your design works for people who do have visual impairments or mobility issues. As a mother with a stroller all the time, I often find these issues to be pertinent for families as well, and so it's really it's a wide range of users that can benefit from these types of strategies. I guess I'll start there. The other thing that I would notice is that a lot of these innovative facilities like cycle tracks, for example, the question of how that type of facility interfaces with accessibility needs. These are important questions to raise early in the process and can really make sure that you have better buy-in when you're trying more sort of out-of-the-box ideas. I'm curious if John Paul or Cynthia have other things to add there.
Well, this is Cynthia, and I think your point about process is really key. Engaging those communities in the discussion about design early on is absolutely critical. There was a case in which a roundabout was proposed for an intersection near a facility that housed the organization that was an advocacy group for disabled folks, and they were not talked with beforehand in terms of engaging them and asking them for their input, which also gives you an opportunity to provide them with information about how the design would make it safer for most of their people. And the project then was not carried through because their opposition was so emotional. So I think it's absolutely critical that we reach out to those advocacy organizations and any housing that is adjacent to a roadway or an intersection that we're redesigning, because sometimes we do have to make adjustments based on the issues of the people who are going to be using it frequently. You might have to add in additional design for people who are blind or are using wheelchairs, and so that's all something that we really need to be looking at, and we need the people who are going to use it to give us that input.
Yeah, I don't know that we've had a huge amount of experience with that in the projects that we've worked on so far, but we do have, there's a project location that we're considering that's been, it's along a corridor that's been a huge focus for our local Center for Independent Living. Because a lot of the neighborhoods we're working in are older, you know, we do see a lot of the infrastructure issues. They may have curb ramps, but they're highly outdated, things like that. But I'm really interested to see how the location we're looking at, which does cross a cycle track and has trolley tracks and all these kinds of other elements that'll play into it, how that comes to bear on you know, designing for people with disabilities and impairments.
And I will just add, the project I was just discussing was not an AALHTO project. It was the community that I live in, and the staff were in very good faith just beginning a conversation about it, but we really have to engage people before we have a meeting of the City Council or the Planning Commission discussing these projects in terms of design. We really need to engage them before the public conversation has begun and make sure that they feel that they've been listened to. When people feel they've been listened to, you'll have an entirely different process than when they feel like they've been overlooked.
I just realized that none of you, I don't think, showed any roundabouts in your presentations. I live in a town that's it's small. It's 2,800 people. We don't even have a traffic light, but pretty soon we're going to have a roundabout, and it's only now after the design is done that I'm recognizing that, you know, people with visual impairments, it's actually harder for them because if you're blind, you're listening to the traffic for cues of when to cross, and roundabouts don't give you those audibles because the traffic is always moving. So it's just you know, more stuff to think about. We've got a question for John, and I was thinking about this too as you were going through your presentation. What kind of permission did you get, if any, to install some of the temporary street paint? So was this, in addition to being tactical urbanism, was it also guerrilla tactical urbanism, or did you actually have to get permits?
The first one on Broad, where there was no real city involvement, we actually got a street closure permit, and were able to reconfigure the street. You know, got the permit with the understanding that we were actually keeping the street open. You know, the the temporary nature of the infrastructure we painted there. I mean, we could have gone back and blasted it up if we'd needed to, but the business association really strongly wanted that to stay, and you know, we designed it to spec as best we could. I worried about it a lot, you know, professionally. I actually was working on that as a volunteer just straight out of planning school. You know, went 2 weeks later and worked at the county for a few years. In the subsequent events, though, the city has been there at the table. So they'll say basically, here's what you can do. You can do X, X, and X if you make it temporary. It's got to be, you know, washed away at the end of the day, whether it's tape or chalk or however you do it. But they've also, in the last couple events, said, well, you can also do Y, Z, and Q that can be made permanent if you can get the volunteer support to do it, you know, actually paint it on the ground and install it. They will help us with the design and making sure that the design is up to engineering standards. In some, you know, in at least one of those cases, the city did come in and stripe things and paint some things. Like we would paint kind of the bump out areas, and they would stripe the bike lanes and install the stop sign. Things that they've just kind of got, you know, they do on a routine basis that would be difficult for us. So the first one, forgiveness more than permission, but since then it's really been a partnership with the city.
Well, I'm glad you got forgiveness. So in Concord, New Hampshire, which is our state's capital, we have a Main Street that has it's very heavily traveled. It's got 4 lanes, and the city has been engaged in a road diet exercise, reducing it to 3 lanes and really augmenting in a beautiful fashion the pedestrian attributes, crosswalks, much wider sidewalks, bump outs. One thing I recognized that that city did was, in addition to having a fairly inclusive planning phase, they've also done a lot of, I think, really effective PR during construction. They hired a PR firm who established a website and it created essentially a place for people to go to get information about the project. Has any of you had an experience in doing something like that?
I would say, you know, in a way, the MEMFix events are kind of PR in general for this different type of infrastructure. You know, no one had ever seen a cycle track then, you know, and it's still kind of a learning curve for people to see it. You know, the city here has done some good PR around some more temporary to permanent kind of approaches, whether it's, you know, we have this Riverside Drive that, and a lot of the time they rely on kind of the earned media rather than hiring someone. The city doesn't really have a budget for that. So they do rely on the advocacy community to help them with that. I think they'd benefit from actually having someone on PR who really understands how to communicate these things to the public.
We have done some work along those lines. This is Cynthia, and I would say that that's really key to success, forming the partnerships with the community organizations that can help you get the message out, and you can create some design for doing PR relatively inexpensively and utilize that to communicate with the public on a regular basis. Whenever projects are done without the public really understanding or being aware, that's particularly, I think, on bike infrastructure when we get a lot of pushback. And so there has to be a public conversation. It has to engage the impacted audiences, and for neighborhoods where you are putting infrastructure in, it really is incumbent upon the local staff to make sure that the property owners and the business owners and the people who live there know what's coming and don't feel surprised. And sometimes that requires even door-to-door leafleting to make sure that everybody has gotten the information.
Yeah, I'll just add that this is a hugely important issue, and it's so often overlooked. You know, as planners or engineers or landscape architects, we're all really skilled at what we do, but in terms of branding and promoting and really just communicating what we're delivering to the public, you know, sometimes we're really limited in what we can do there. And so reserving some budget for that, and it really doesn't have to cost a lot of money, can really make a difference between delivering a really good project and delivering a great project that attracts a lot of people to use it. And so we've seen a lot of success here in California with some really nice interactive websites and print campaigns that, you know, promote safety and talk about the project and get people really engaged and involved up front is critical to the success of the project.
I think you're on mute.
I beg your pardon, I am no longer. So you've all been talking about you know, the importance of PR, and I'm thinking about educating in particular bicyclists. So Cynthia, you were talking about you know, educating property owners about the importance of these changes. So I'm thinking in New York City, you know, bicycle couriers are one of the sources of great hazard for a lot of people. Do you find we also have to be educating not only the property owners but bicyclists about how to use these facilities?
Sure. This is Cynthia again. Of course, in the case of the bicycle couriers, I don't think it's an issue of lack of knowledge. I think it's an unwillingness to follow the rules. We were involved in a project in Grand Rapids in which we did a community survey, and then we did focus groups. And it was very interesting because one of the things that we found was for certain groups, particularly younger men, giving them the message about the fact that it's illegal or unsafe to do something has no impact, they told us, on their behavior. What does have impact is enforcement. And so you can set up an enforcement program that is a diversion program, and we have those locally, in which you have an opportunity for a cyclist who receives a ticket to get a large part of the ticket waived by doing an exam, and the League of Illinois Bicyclists created an online exam, and they can go through and do the exam, print out their results, take it to the city, and get most of their ticket waived, at least for the first offense. So you're both educating and changing behavior, and that's really what we're talking about trying to do here, is change behavior. And so for different groups of people, you have to have different mechanisms to change behavior. And in the case of the bicycle carriers, I think an enforcement program is probably more in line with what you would need.
Yeah, I'll add that a couple of really effective strategies that we've seen here in San Francisco are education programs from the city and from local advocacy groups that really help people understand the rules of the road. And a lot of times we see poor behavior coming from on streets that just don't have the right facilities for bicyclists to use. The other thing that we're finding is that it's oftentimes just a couple of bad apples that are giving the reputation to all bicyclists. The same as, you know, when we see people driving disrespectfully or, walking in a way that may seem or be unsafe. That there's a lot of bicyclists that are obeying the rules of the road and are respectful, but are getting a poor reputation from others. And so really educating folks and really developing a culture of respect on the streets is so important.
Yeah, and I'll add, I mean, in a lot of cases, and it's improved over the past 5 years as we've built more infrastructure, but I would say that, you know, bicyclists are in general kind of less, I mean, they're almost invisible in a lot of the communications that we hear from elected officials and people just in the community, except when they're doing something that is perceived as breaking the law or dangerous. I mean, that's when they're their most visible. And from a personal standpoint, working for an advocacy organization, I've been really hesitant to pursue a big law enforcement strategy just for fears that it will become a profiling strategy. That's something that we've heard when we've met with people in lower income communities of color. That they're getting stopped, usually older African American men, and it's basically just it's the doorway to ask them for identification and all these kinds of things. So I think it's something that deserves a lot of thought as to who is the target for enforcement efforts. Can they be more educational enforcement? Our city has done some pamphlets and things like that. We've worked on putting out spoke cards that you can just hand out to people, hand out at community group meetings and things like that. That's just a very simple explanation of what the rules of the road are and what the proper etiquette is.
This is Cynthia. I would like to add one more thing on the enforcement issue. We have been working in a number of communities to create education programs in cooperation with law enforcement. I think that that's really key. In some of the communities that we have worked in, when we talked to law enforcement, they were very upfront with us in saying that they use the bicycle ordinances as a tool in higher crime areas. And then, of course, you do, in fact, as John was saying, have those communities feel that they are being unfairly targeted. So you really do need to be working with law enforcement and engaging them so that the enforcement is equitable and done in a way that provides people with education and opportunity more than being punitive. The other thing I want to say, since you see my credential, I'm a league cycling instructor. I think there is a lot of value in providing education in the community with certified instructors, and it's often undervalued by communities that the more people you have who are behaving appropriately on the roadway, the more often people will follow along. If you have good self-enforcing infrastructure that cyclists see other people using appropriately, people by and large will then behave appropriately. And as Brooke said, then you've got the few outliers that you really have to look at from an enforcement issue as well as education.
Well, as a bicyclist who has had a number of near misses and actually been driven off the road once or twice, I greatly appreciate your efforts at making it safer for everyone. We are now out of questions, so unless you have any final comments, I'm going to close the webcast.
I have just a couple of quick announcements on behalf of APBP. I wanted to let everybody know that on November 18th, APBP will be doing a webinar on bike boxes. So if you're interested in learning more about that innovative treatment, you can go to the website and register there. I also wanted to mention that both Cynthia and John Paul spoke at the APBP Professional Development Seminar this September in St. Louis. And if you want to know more about innovations in bike and walk planning, the PDFs of all the presentations from that seminar are available at APBP's website as well. So thank you so much for inviting us to speak today. This was great fun.
And Kit, could you give us the website, please?
Yes, it's www.apbp.org, and that is like Apple Paul, Bicycle Paul.
Thank you.
This is Cynthia again. I just wanted to add that if you go to the League of American Bicyclists website and go to the Smart Cycling section, there are quite a number of really helpful and well done videos and other educational tools that are entirely and completely free for communities to use. Before you install bicycle infrastructure, you absolutely need to be having a community conversation about how they're used and providing links to those sorts of resources so that when people come to you and say, I don't understand how I'm supposed to turn into a driveway around a bike lane, you can direct them to the video that you have set up a link for on your website. So those are really helpful tools. They're free and anybody can access them.
And I'll just say, for any planners that are in Tennessee or near Tennessee, Bike Walk Tennessee is a good resource. We do an annual summit where we, talk about
state of the practice in the state, and what else we can be doing around the state to encourage more bikeable, walkable communities.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. This has been a terrific presentation. For attendees, remember you can log your credits by going on to APA and searching for this event under Transportation Planning Division. And this concludes today's broadcast. Thank you.